much going on at the moment.
So I think we will just get right to it, if that's
Perfect.
okay with you.
Absolutely.
So Secretary General, thank you very much for talking to Reuters. If I could begin by asking you how seriously, from a NATO point of view, you view yesterday's incident involving Turkey, the targeting of a NATO member by an Iranian ballistic missile.
Well, we clearly condemn it. As you know, NATO air missile defense was able to take it out. So that was very important. It also shows you, I think, clear evidence that we, with a 360-degree approach, we will defend every inch of NATO territory. Our military are constantly on it. But of course, this was serious and absolutely condemnable.
Can you share any more details about the incident? Do you know what the target was, the intended target was, and who exactly fired the missile?
I'm afraid I cannot do that in this open interview, but it was clearly a serious incident.
And how big is the risk that an incident like this draws all of NATO into the conflict, that Iran or one of its proxies attacks a NATO ally, that ally invokes Article 5, and NATO suddenly then is at war with Iran?
Well, Article 5, I think, is not in order here. Nobody's talking about Article 5. And the most important thing is that our adversaries have seen yesterday that NATO is so strong and so vigilant, and even more vigilant, if possible, since Saturday because of the situation, of course, in the Middle East. So they see and know and sense that our military are on this.
But just to follow up on that question of the risk that this conflict poses, you've obviously praised President Trump. You think that what he's doing is correct, he and the Israelis. But by the same token, it is a major conflict on NATO's doorstep. What risks does it pose for the alliance, and what steps are you taking to mitigate those?
But let's also think about the risks if the president would not have done this. We know that Iran was close to getting his hands on a nuclear capability, a missile capability, which would be a threat not only to the Middle East and of course to Israel, and potentially it would be life-threatening to Israel, but also a threat to Europe. I've seen in my own country where members of the Iranian diaspora were constantly under threat from the regime in Tehran. So in that sense, I think, and I see this widespread in Europe and with allies, that we support the president in taking out that capability, as the Americans were able to do, and they're working on that, as we know. But of course, there are always downsides in the sense that you have to be sure that you defend every inch of NATO territory, as we are doing.
Do you have a clear idea of the US and Israel's desired end state here? Because obviously we've seen with other conflicts in the region, they resulted in instability that posed security risks for Europe. So do you have a clear idea of the end state here, and how sure can you be that it won't pose new security risks for Europe?
Well, obviously we are in the early stages of this campaign. We are now day 4, day 5 since last Saturday, and it will be difficult to assess exactly how this will end in the coming weeks. But I think there is widespread acknowledgement and agreement that at least we have to be sure that going forward, Iran, this republic, is not able again to pose death threat to its neighbors, to Israel, the Middle East, to Europe, but also through its terrorist activities, exporting chaos, exporting terrorism, basically to the whole world, and particularly again to, of course, the free world, the Western world, and to the Middle East. So that's the minimum I think we all agree upon.
But are you confident there is a plan to actually do that? This is a country of 90 million people. There's talk now of arming the Kurds, a potential civil conflict. I mean, do you see clear ideas of how this is meant to end and how you get to stability?
Well, clearly NATO is not itself involved here. NATO allies are providing key enabling support. What we see here is that NATO in that sense is also this power projection platform for the United States. Because without European allies, the US would have found it very difficult to launch this campaign against Iran, because we see, you've heard the German Chancellor in the Oval Office and so many others making sure that the US can make use of these key enablers. But we are, other than that, not directly involved. So, but from my conversations with senior American military and political leaders, it's my absolute sense that they know what they are doing.
And How do you assess the role, if any, of Russia in this conflict? Obviously, Russia and Iran have had a close relationship in recent years. Do you see Russia directly helping Iran in this conflict?
Well, I think what we know is that Iran was one of the key supporters of the Russian war effort against Ukraine, totally unprovoked. This crazy war which started in 2014 and then the full-scale invasion in February 2022. But what we also see now is that Ukraine is already for some weeks being able to recapture territory which the Russians got their hands on before. So that is really good news. We know that the Ukrainians are posing extreme losses on the Russians month in, month out. Many times more than the Russians lost in Afghanistan in the 1980s. The numbers are staggeringly high. And now the Ukrainians are making their knowledge of drone technology and anti-drone technology available to the United States, to our friends and partners in the Middle East. So it is also Ukraine stepping up. And I'm not sure that Russia is very happy about that. And Russia will not be very happy about the fact that Iran will find it very difficult to keep on supporting Russia, as it is so busy now to handle from their side this campaign, and clearly unsuccessful, which is good news.
Right, but there is obviously a potential downside for Ukraine in all of this. Demand for air defence, which is already very high. As you know, it's a struggle to get what Ukraine has been asking for already. Now you have countries across the Middle East depleting stocks in terms of their air defence, probably wanting a lot more than they've had in the past. Can NATO do anything about that to make sure that Ukraine does not lose out on military support as a result of this conflict?
What I'm sensing and hearing from my conversations with many leaders in Europe, in the United States, Canada, is an approach where we say it has to be end-end. It is end, make sure that as allies we enable what the Americans are doing in the Middle East, in Iran, against Iran, and not Iran, I should say, but the regime, because this is not, I think, a fight with Iran or the Iranian people, it is with the regime. And at the same time, making sure that Ukraine has what it needs to stay strong in the fight now, but also hopefully past the peace deal to be as strong as possible going forward. Therefore, the fact that Ukraine is now exporting, making available to allies, friends, partners, its impressive knowledge, experience with drone and anti-drone technology is a case in point, because it will also make it possible for countries in the Middle East to, at a considerable lower cost, to take out some of the Iranian drones. Better to do that with anti-drone technology than with expensive interceptors. So that conversation is ongoing, and I know that Ukraine is in close contact with our friends and partners in the Middle East, Jordan and UAE and Bahrain, and of course all the other countries in the Gulf.
Right, but there is a finite amount of this stuff. It was already in short supply. I mean, do you need to take some kind of dramatic steps or initiative, perhaps with industry, to say you're going to have to ramp up much more and much more quickly than you thought? Yes,
and luckily that debate has started already before last Saturday. We have seen the American president signing 3 executive orders. I think it was in April, May last year to basically free up the defense industrial base in the US as much as possible. We see all these examples of cross-Atlantic, transatlantic cooperation between American and European companies working together. For example, this example of a factory in the south of Germany producing interceptors for anti-air and missile defense systems. But of course we need to have more of this. We are getting better and better when it comes to the production of ammunition. That has been 6-fold now compared to only a couple of years ago. Also because we needed this, Ukraine needed it because of the war effort against Russia. But we have to replicate what we are doing with ammunition when it comes to the other big ticket items, and then figuring in the latest technologies, the latest insights. This is one of the reasons why we have this joint operation now in Poland, JTAC, where we capture as NATO and Ukraine together all the lessons from the war and implementing them as fast as possible in our own doctrines.
We don't have a huge amount of time, so I want to cover a couple of other topics as well. I wanted to ask for your response to President Macron's speech on nuclear deterrence this week. What did you make of it?
Yes, I spoke with him on Sunday on the phone, and so before the speech, and I said that I really welcome what he is doing here, because it is opening up a conversation to have a NATO to discuss how we can add this extra complexity, not for NATO, of course, but for the Russians. It will make it more complex for them to sense, understand exactly how they have to perceive our deterrence and defense. So it will add to our deterrence and defense in that sense. And I think that's very important. And I know that already 7 or 8 NATO allies have started conversations now with the French. We will continue to do that also as NATO. So I really welcome this. It is leveraging more what France is doing. However, and we all agree on this, the ultimate supreme guarantor of our way of life, the fact that we have free media, free press, that we have elections, that we have our way of life regained, so hard fought after the Second World War, is in the end the United States nuclear umbrella, and that is key.
But doesn't this risk a confusion there in terms of who is expected to do what in the most grave circumstance possible, nuclear warfare? Does this not muddy the waters in terms of who's really responsible for protecting Europe here?
I don't think so. No, I'm absolutely not afraid of that, because we know France already has a nuclear capability. The Brits have a nuclear capability. We have the United States as an ultimate guarantor. It's massive nuclear capability. And of course, in NATO, what we are good at is command and control, making sure that whenever somebody will be so crazy to attack us, as long as possible, of course, keep it conventional, but if necessary, also to make use of our nuclear capability.
But as you know, one of the reasons this initiative has been taken up and has been welcomed by others is also because there is nervousness about the United States, about its commitment to European defence. I know you said repeatedly they're committed to Article 5, but President Trump has said that what governs his decisions on use of force is his sense of morality. So how confident can Europeans be that they're still covered by that US nuclear umbrella and will continue to be for years to come?
Let me first of all say that from my conversation with the French, this has nothing to do with any worry about yes or no, the US, yes or no committed to NATO. And then to the more general point, I'm absolutely convinced the US is completely committed to NATO, not only because the US knows that there is a historic reason to be so much involved in European security, but also because NATO and the US, let's not forget, is over 50% of NATO economy, and the other 31 allies are less than are a little bit under 50% of NATO economy, because the United States knows that to stay safe itself, the US mainland, you need a secure Atlantic, a secure Europe, a secure Arctic. That's what we collectively work on, and this campaign in Iran is evidence of this, because it provides this platform of power projection by the United States, making therefore not NATO being involved in the campaign, but enabling NATO allies what the US is doing. So for all these reasons, in all my conversations with the Pentagon, State, with the White House, there is total commitment. There was one big irritant, not paying enough. And that we solved in The Hague with the famous 5%.
I wanted to ask about your approach to President Trump, because you have faced criticism for it. I mean, you've praised him for this attack on Iran, even though some NATO national leaders have made clear they oppose it. A Harvard professor in Foreign Policy magazine accused you of going to enormous lengths to appease and flatter Trump and said you were making a big mistake. Even the French foreign minister has publicly criticised you. How do you respond to such criticism? Do you feel you need to tone it down a bit?
Well, I hear the criticism, obviously. I'm not deaf. But I do believe that the American president, the United States being the most powerful and most quintessential ally within the alliance, if the president of that country is able to get the whole of NATO at 2% last year, you remember at the start of last year, big economies like Spain, Belgium, Canada, Italy were not on 2%, smaller ones like Slovenia and others. The whole of NATO reaching the 2%. And then in The Hague, collectively agreeing to the 5%. Not because only because we needed to equalize our spending in Europe and Canada with what the United States is spending, including the 3.5% on core defense spending, but also because this is crucial given our plans, our capability planning process, our NDPP process, which my predecessor started, Jens Stoltenberg, assessing the gaps between where we are and where we need to be if we want to be able not only today we can defend ourselves, but also longer term. Also for that reason we needed at 5%, but I would doubt it. Without President Trump we would have reached it. We would have reached it. And then him now taking this decisive action to take out this capability of Iran to pose a threat as an exporter of terrorism and chaos to the Middle East, to Europe, to the world. I think if a president of a country is providing that type of leadership, some praise is warranted.
You mentioned Spain, you mentioned 5%. Spain has not committed to the 5%, as you know, and President Trump has threatened Spain with a trade embargo as a result of that and as a result of Spain not supporting this military action. Is that the right way for allies to speak to each other? Have you spoken to President Trump or Prime Minister Sanchez about it to try and bring the tension down?
Let me first of all say that Spain also signed the summit declaration. I think that the discussion with Spain is that they are saying we accept the capability targets, but we believe we can do it at a lower amount of spending. And I told them you can't, and practice will show. But you committing to the capability targets, in the end, I'm sure they will see that they need to spend what is necessary. Let me also praise Spain, because Spain is deployed all over NATO territory. They have their troops are part of many forward land forces, many initiatives, many NATO missions. I really want to commend them for that. There is as we speak, a Patriot system in Turkey, defending key American interests in Turkey. And is there already for 10 years, protecting this key US interest. And yes, there are also discussions on this, but this is an alliance of democracies. What I'm seeing in Europe is widespread support for what the American president is doing, also enabling what he is doing, not becoming party to it, but enabling what the US is doing. And you will always have differences. Then, of course, to your question itself, as you know, when there are debates between allies, I always try to stay a bit muted, and therefore being able, if necessary, to help a bit.
Thank you very much, Secretary General.
Thank you very much. Thank you.